Hey there, guys. I wanted to drop in real quick to talk to you about a brand new offer that I've put together just for you. It truly is going to revolutionize the way that you do business. I am offering a 90-minute strategy session that's also going to give you a visual roadmap that will guide you over the next 6 months to be able to accomplish any author goal you want to make happen. So here's the thing, we all need some one-on-one guidance sometimes. And the whole idea behind this is to give you the one-on-one personalized experience that you're really craving and get you on the road to your greatest success, right? That's all we really want for you. So if you're curious about how this is going to work, head over to authorrevolution.org/visual map and learn more about it today. Welcome to the Author Revolution podcast, where change is not just embraced, it's celebrated. I'm Carissa Andrews, international best-selling author, indie author coach, and your navigator through the ever-evolving landscape of authorship. Are you ready to harness the power of your mind and the latest innovations in technology for your writing journey? If you're passionate about manifesting your dreams and pioneering new writing frontiers, then you're in the perfect place. Here, we merge the mystical woo of writing with the exciting advancements of the modern world. We dive into the realms of mindset, manifestation, and the transformative magic that occurs when you believe in the impossible. We also venture into the world of futuristic technologies and strategies, preparing you for the next chapter in your author career. Every week, we explore new ways to revolutionize your writing and publishing experience. From AI to breakthrough thinking, this podcast is your gateway to a world where creativity meets innovation. Whether you're penning your first novel or expanding your literary empire, whether you're a devotee of the pen or a digital storyteller, this podcast is where your author revolution gains momentum. So join me in this journey to continue growth and transformation. It's time to redefine what it means to be an author in today's dynamic world. This is the Author Revolution podcast, and your author revolution starts now. Well, hi there. Welcome back to another episode of the Author Revolution podcast. Now, for those of you who have been around for a while, you know that I'm kind of the type of person that really loves this notion of transformation, of taking something that we have been thinking about or perceiving in a certain way and shifting it just a bit, or being open and unapologetically us and unafraid to try new things or do new things, right? Without having that fear of what's this going to mean for us? And so it's in that vein that I invited my next guest on. She has created this new world that has just enamored me. I love her book. I love her thought process. And I love the way that she has merged philosophy and theology and a dystopian, slightly shifted version of reality into her book. And so we're going to talk with Amy Vogel. She is a fantasy author who has written a book called Teleosis, and she's working on the rest of the books in the series right now. And one of the greatest things about this conversation is her process through storytelling and her process through what it means to lift people up, to transform, to transcend, and especially the messages that she carries for young women who are entering into this space that, we need your voices. We need you to be able to take the torch and help us to elevate, our author community, help us elevate the community in general, help us to really elevate the world. And so while we are going to be discussing her book, the message here is much bigger and broader than that. And I think you're going to find everything she has to say really enlightening and inspiring. So without further ado, let's get into it. Well, hi, Amy. It's great to meet you. Welcome to the Author Revolution podcast. I'm excited to speak with you today. But before we get started, I would love for you, in your own words, to tell my audience a little bit more about who you are and what you write.
Well, I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm so happy to be here with you today. And let's just see, a quick story. So my bio is I'm an author, I'm a speaker, and I'm a story coach. And so what I focus on every day is how to empower people, specifically women, to know that they have a story to tell, whether that's through reading my stories, hearing my talks, or even understanding how they can tell their own stories. And those stories end up changing the world. If we change ourselves, we change the world. So I'm here to help people realize the power of story and get a vision for how the world can be a much better place.
I love that. What a great like mission, really. Honestly, I think you and I are very similar of that. I love the power of transformation. I love to be able to see the world differently and envision something that's going to be better than what we think at first, or, just adhering to the status quo or any of those things. And we're definitely going to be talking about that because I know your book called Teleosis touches on a lot of those touch points. So let's talk about teleosis at first. And like, can you give my audience a little bit of an insight of what that book is about?
Absolutely. So Teleosis is a novel of trauma and transformation. And so it is a modern fantasy. It is specifically in this world, so on Earth, but it is a different dimension. I don't even know if a dimension is the right word, but it's just a reimagining of the world that includes a civilization that was based in gender equality and where women led the way. And that goes back to the beginning. A lot of this came from my Christian spiritual roots. And so I retold the Genesis creation narrative and made it so that the quote unquote fall, which we tend to associate with Eve, right? Of course.
Yep.
That fall didn't happen in Genesis 3. For this civilization of Teleosis, their creation narrative is the fall happened in Genesis 4 when Cain killed Abel. So when murder and violence entered the picture, that's when the actual fall happened. So that's their creation mythology that comes out really, really early, I think in the very first chapter. And so it paints the picture for how this civilization of Teleosis became the most innovative, became the most thriving society in the world until it was destroyed. And that's kind of the pivot point of the story, is that, when you're doing something wonderful for the world, there are going to be people that have problems with it and want to take you down. And so it goes through this story, it started 20 years ago when the civilization was destroyed, with the story of Anira Bohem, who is the heir to the high priestess role, which was like their world, their civilization leader. But she never got to be that because of the destruction that happened. So she moves to the US, gets remarried, has a child, has a daughter, rebuilds her life, and thinks that's going to be it until someone comes along and gives her the opportunity to rebuild the civilization. And so the story takes off from there.
I love that. What a cool, like I got goosebumps from that. It's such a cool way to view things and look at. I love when people can take a look at something like our current belief system about like the Bible, or the way that the fall happens, or some of those deep-rooted mythologies that we believe to be true, and just shift it just slightly, and how that shift creates such a deep and profound perspective change. I mean, I love that. One of the books that I wrote, it's called Awakening. It's about like the Christian myth too, and like what could have happened if someone from the future actually went to the past in order to create the role of Jesus. Like it was a
Oh,
time travel situation. And so I
mm,
like looking at mythologies, or looking at different aspects of things that we believe, and just tilting them just slightly and just seeing how it could be different. I love that. It's so cool. I can't wait to dig into this book. It's my next book. Once I finish my nonfiction book right now called The Tools, if anyone's curious.
okay.
That one's an interesting book too. Okay, so Amy, teleosis has been described as a spiritual odyssey, and one that navigates through, like you just said, trauma and transformation. How does your main character, Inira, right? That's how you
Mm-hmm,
pronounce it. How
mm-hmm.
how does her story mirror some of the things that you've gone through, or maybe some of the philosophies that you've had to deal with in overcoming adversity or finding your own strength? Does that
Yeah.
overlap?
Oh, of course. I think you always write your way through a story. And when I say your way, like that, so much of me and where I was at the time went into the story. In fact, in my acknowledgments, I always read author acknowledgments, because if it's really good, you're going to get the juicy pieces of where the story came from. And so I try to include that in mind. So I tell the story in the acknowledgments of how this book came to be. And at the time, I had stepped out of ministry. I was in a pastoral role for 10 years and stepped out of it. My church ended. I was like, oh crap, what do I do? And so I had been reading nonfiction. I had been reading theology for 10 years. I had lost that first love of fiction. And so my way to recover from depression due to burnout, because I was just overdone, was read. I read 77 books in 6 months. That's more or less what I did all day.
I
And
love
at the
that though.
time, at the time I was married to somebody who could I could do that.
Right?
But now I got to work, but that's okay. Um,
It's bringing
but
you to
I
your next purpose. It's good.
ex- exactly. But I was 3 or 4 months into this recovery process, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to start writing again. Finally, it had started coming back a little bit. You know how when you've been sick for a while, it takes you a little bit to recover. And so I
Mm.
kind of felt like that was what was happening with my creativity. So I actually started writing 2 books at one time. I started writing my latest nonfiction devotional called Come to Me. And that was like a snack almost. That was me dipping my toe back in the water. I knew how to write devotionals because I already had written one book. And so it was my way of processing through actual tangible healing. Teleosis, on the other side, was the therapy of working through all of the toxic theology that I had internalized. And in the wake of the pandemic, in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, in the wake of the Me Too movement, in the wake of the awakening that has
Yeah.
happened, and then my own personal awakening as a woman, um, which I love. I mean, I've always said I'm a late bloomer. I came to it when I was in, my mid 40s, but teleosis was me writing my way out of all of that and working to envision a world where it's not just the patriarchy, it's not just institutionalized racism, it's not just, all of these things that plague our world. There is something more possible. And, the vision of Jesus is part of that. And I even referenced that in the book. And it was just one of those things where I was like, I have got to picture something besides what I'm seeing around me.
Yeah.
And so let me create it for myself. And in fact, I mentioned this in the acknowledgments. I got the idea for the book on the way to a therapy appointment. And my therapist let me flush it out in our therapy session. So I thanked her
That's
in the
good.
acknowledgments for allowing me to pay her to discuss my book and not my personal issues. So,
I love that.
yeah.
Oh, too fun. I mean, I think that what you're describing is so profound because one of the things that we teach at Author Revolution is that when you're trying to create something new, whether it be a successful author career or more money in your career or get yourself out of burnout or, just develop your storyline, the goal is always to like not be stuck in what is or even what used to be
Mm-hmm.
or what was, but rather envision your future self, envision that future point. And so when you're in a place like, obviously you're a very philosophical thinker. And so when you're looking at things like religion and theology and how societal structures are built, being able to let that drop and envision something new or different, that's powerful because that literally shifts like your vibration. It shifts the people who read
Mm-hmm.
it, like they're like what they believe to be possible. That is so cool. So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, it was necessary. I had to get out of the headspace I was in. And the way I did that was through reading. And then for me, I've seen it a lot in different uh, Adrienne Marie Brown is somebody I follow and am really impressed with her vision of the way that the world can work. And I forget her last name, Trisha. She's called the Nat Bishop. And so basically, these Black women who are re-envisioning the world as resistance is through rest and resistance is through art. And so for me, all of those came to start cooking in my brain, and
Ah,
and then I started living them, and I started living a life that was not based on grind culture and trying to churn out X amount of words a day or this kind of thing. It was like I just have to go with the flow. And then that art is resistance against the current structures that we have in place, whether that's in the church or government. I mean, they all reflect each other. But in knowing too, I've read quite a few books where it wasn't always this way, right? That there have
Yeah.
been other civilizations on this earth that where women have led the way, whether that's in Africa or the Mediterranean or in the Middle East, where it just, there are so many options for how to create a society that is much more beneficial to everyone. And I had to write about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then to envision and create structures that aren't so, like you said, grind culture or, push, 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 go, 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 be
Mm-hmm.
as productive as humanly possible. It allow rather than force, it's that allowance, that receiving of creativity, receiving of the information that needs to be told, and tapping into, I think, more of the right messages too that need to be
Mm-hmm.
told. Because otherwise, if you're forcing creativity to do your bidding, we all know that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes our creative mind kind of goes, fine, you take the wheel, I don't care. And then you're like, where was I going with that again?
Right.
There's not enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Insert writer's block. Yeah, that's how it works for me.
Yes.
Like it's just not, and if it's not flowing, it's not flowing. And there have been several times over the last couple of years where something major has happened in my life, whether it's emotional or physical, and I just got to put everything down for a little bit because my energy is being directed towards healing, or my energy is being directed towards supporting my kids, or it's just, you got to go with the flow. And I truly admire these people that can just sit down and crank out a book, or they can crank out a novella in 2 months time. I just don't work like that. I had this conversation with my best friend yesterday, who's my she's my alpha reader. She reads everything. Like as
Love
soon
it.
as I write it, she's like, send it to me. And I was like, did I feel like I've said this before, because this is, yeah, I'm at this point with my second fiction book. I'm like, I don't have that far to go. Why did I think I had that far to go? I only have about 10 chapters or so left. And she's like, you did this with Teleosis. And I was like, well, just expect it to come around again.
Yeah, yeah. In that mid
Like,
manifestation
over.
of creation, you feel
Yep.
like you're in the weeds. You're like, where is
Yep.
that? Like shining light drawing me near.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. And then you realize, oh, it's really not that far away. I'm almost done. So,
yeah, yeah. Isn't that interesting?
mm-hmm.
Okay, so you and I obviously shared this love of fantasy and being able to use fantasy to kind of uproot or uproot those deep, like real world issues. So, how
Mm-hmm.
do you feel when you're digging into fantasy? Like, how do you feel of fantasy even as a genre, and how it can empower readers or writers to reimagine like what we're trying to create in this world, or how they confront their challenges? Do you feel it's the best genre, or are you like, oh, all sorts of them? It's great.
Yeah, no, I think sci-fi and fantasy, this is the greatest strength of that genre in particular, because you get the license, you get the dramatic license to just think big thoughts, and the challenge is to take those big thoughts and then make them applicable, make them, put them in a story form. And in certain ways, you have to do this with nonfiction too. I coach several nonfiction clients, people who are writing books, but you still have to tell a story, right? And it has to be compelling, otherwise people are not going to be interested. So for me, I like fantasy and sci-fi, even though I'm not a sci-fi really reader or writer. My partner is, but I think it just gives you the freedom to reimagine things, especially like with sci-fi and space sci-fi. When you go to another planet, right,
Right.
you
Yeah.
you can create from scratch.
Yeah.
And then fantasy's got that license too. I think as I'm beginning to write a historical fiction, that trend towards reimagining what happened in the past and telling it in a different way is a really big creative movement right now.
Mm.
And it's something like, one of the authors I really like is Octavia Butler,
Hmm.
and she's really good at retelling things. She's also a sci-fi author too, but she's taking those things kind of out of context, but applying a different context to them.
Yep.
And then there's a whole big wave in romance too, where I mean, there's so many authors who are just taking different myths, taking different stories that we've heard all of our lives, and mythologies, and even modern mythologies like
Fairy
uh,
tales. Yeah,
yeah, fairy tales, Disney movies, that kind of thing, and
right.
retelling them, twisting them, making them darker. Just creating something new out of something that already is. And
Yep.
it's fascinating to be in the publishing world now to see all of these trends kind of
Yeah,
coming and going.
I agree. And it's so fascinating to see us being so creative because
Mm-hmm.
we're taking something and if we don't quite like how it turned out, well, we can shift it just a little bit. We can change
Yep.
it. I love
Yep.
that.
I just want to say one more thing. I think this is
Yeah.
really empowering for women because we traditionally haven't had the voices to say, and not just the voice and not just the seat at the table, but just saying, screw the table, right? I'm going to go over here and create a house, right? And
Yeah.
so we've got that, more of that license now, and we're not playing into the, like in publishing, into the traditional power structures. I have to have an agent, I have to have this, I have to have this, right? Nope, we're doing it on our own. And I think there's a huge trend in empowerment in that takes nuance, takes business acumen, it takes all of those things, but never has there been a point in time where women have had that big of an opportunity to say what we need to say.
I agree with you. And it's so funny that you needed to say that because my next question was what messages do you hope to convey to your
Yeah,
readers, particularly young women, about their power
yeah,
and place in the world?
absolutely. I mean, if you
Yeah.
look at social media, you look at just the availability of information, which they talked about when I was growing up. I'm Gen X, but I have two Gen Z daughters and one Gen Alpha daughter. And I can see the differences in even those generations because I had my youngest a little later. And it's so fascinating with all the information they have, and we have these conversations a lot. I'm like, it is up to your generation to change because at 11, at 17, at 20, or even before that, what it took me till my 40s to learn. You
Right.
got a
Right.
25-year head start. Please
Do
go
something with this. Yeah.
do something. You've got it. You've got so much more time than the rest of us have had, and you've got the mediums and the methods to make it happen. So
Ah,
yes, young women listening, please go do it. We need you desperately. Like, go do it.
right.
Listen to the wisdom of your elders, but at the same time, blaze the trail, please.
Oh, absolutely. I love what you said though. Like there were very, like I'm Gen X too. Well, I'm kind of like a Zennial. I'm like in that weird little time
Mm-hmm.
frame in between. And it was like I always had some of these thoughts and I'm like, why are people looking at the world this way? Like why
Mm-hmm.
and that why are they so stuck with it? Like it
Mm-hmm.
didn't make sense to my brain as a kid, but my mom was ahead of her time too. She was very,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she still is. I mean, she's still around, don't get me wrong. She's around. And she was always though as a child talking about, different ways things could be done or like perception. And my grandfather was really into Krishnamurti. And so like we had discussions about perception, like even when I was a kid. And so seeing the generations below us pick it up and understand it so much
Mm-hmm.
faster has been really cool. Like I remember, do you remember when The Matrix came out and people were
Absolutely.
blown
Yep.
away? That
Yep.
that was such a revolutionary film to me as a person because I was like, oh, there was something so deeply resonating with that. And I remember having conversations with the women at work who were, older than me, and they're like, that was a weird film. Like I just didn't get it. And you're just like, how did you not get that film? It was so profound. Like what?
Right.
And my kids, like they were 7 when they were watching it and they got it. So it's
Yep.
like it's so
Yep.
cool to see how that gets to shift and how I think our understanding of things does transcend and go down to that younger generation so they pick it up faster. And I'm hoping, like you said, I'm hoping they pick up that baton and keep making it shift, right?
Right. Right.
So, as a spiritual guidance counselor, how has your professional background then influenced the themes of healing, empowerment, and all those good things in your writing? Do you incorporate any specific like practices or philosophies into your storytelling?
Absolutely. So in teleosis in particular, because I'm writing about a woman who's in recovery. She's a recovering alcoholic and early in her recovery. She's in therapy. She's practicing therapeutic tools with her therapist. There's actually a chapter in the book where it's her in a therapy session. Some of it was dismantling the myths, right, around how people practice this. And, all three of my kids are in therapy. Like they get these tools as a preteen, as a teenager, whereas I didn't get them until my 40s. So like again, y'all are already ahead of the curve. Go do it. But it was so important to me to see, and some of this intrinsically at the time, right? Like you're creating it, but you don't really have the consciousness about it until later. So I can talk about the process now because I'm looking back at it, but at the time I was just going on feeling.
Sure.
But it was important to me to communicate as somebody who is a big believer in therapy, as somebody who's a big believer in mindfulness, centering, embodiment practices. You see her do so many of that thing, so many of those things to practice her recovery in such a way that it's also a compelling vision, that you don't have to stay as you are, that there's always some kind of transformation that can be coming. And, as we talked about this, the word teleosis is the Greek word for transformation.
I
And
love that.
so I created a civilization around the idea of transformation.
Yeah.
And she taught in that therapy session, she talks about the etymology of that word too.
So
I love
cool.
it when they include the word, right? They use the word. That's the title for the book, and they explain it in the book.
Yeah.
But she does a lot of self-soothing techniques. It's just important for people to know that real people, they can make mistakes, because she does make a big mistake. And I've even had a fellow author give me some really negative feedback about her story arc, that this fellow author that was reading it, she's like, I really lost a ton of respect for her because of some of the choices she made. And I was like, oh, that wasn't based on anything in my reality, but I get it. Like that's your
Yeah.
stuff. And I don't want to spoil it, but to see her be a real person and use these tools in order to get healing, to move towards wholeness, that was a huge part of where I was when I was writing the book. And now after releasing it, it's like people, it's not just you have to always stay this way or somebody else has to do it for you. You're an active participant in your own healing journey. So yes,
Love
it
that.
was really, really important for me to see that. And then my other alpha reader is my oldest daughter, who's 20. And her positive feedback during the reading of it was, I'm so glad you actually wrote out a therapy scene, because it just kind of takes the sting out of it, right? Like it demystifies. Yeah, therapy can be painful, but it is so beneficial. It's one of those things like working out. You got to work out your soul. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Oh, so good. So, what were some of the most important or significant challenges that you faced when you were writing Teleosis? Was there anything that you had to overcome in order to allow it to flow out? Or did they like, how did that work for you? And what did you end up feeling as you were going through that process?
well, as you know, there are many different processes in this one process.
Right.
So you have first draft, you have second draft, you have developmental editing, you've got beta reading, you've got
I've gone through
arcing.
all the emotions now. Thanks a lot, universe.
I've read this manuscript 6 or 7 times in
Yeah.
multiple forms, right? In fact, I had a friend text me last week. She was like, "I love this line you wrote," and I'm like, "Where is that? I don't know. I know I've read this book a bunch, but great. I'm glad you loved it." Um, it's hard for me to go back and read my own work because I immediately click into that. How could I have done this better? So,
Sure. I think most
um,
of us are like that. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, so the process of it, the writing of the first draft was really getting it all out, getting all the thoughts on the paper. The process of the developmental edit that I actually engaged with an editor to do that, was waiting on pins and needles to see what she was going to say. Did she like it? What is it? Can I do anything with it? And then from there, reading her feedback, and then going through all of those changes, then going into the beta readers, having the beta readers come back with the feedback. And then the story that you end up with was not for me completely radically different, but there were enough significant changes from first draft to the final draft that the story had changed. Like I said, it's not significantly, but the way things worked out were just different than I originally thought they would when I
Sure.
started writing it. So like I had a completely different ending when I first started writing the first draft. and a
Okay.
completely different relationship between the main character and her love interest. You know, it's just like it's I don't have one word for the whole process, but it is a very much a journey and a process to get there. And you just kind of have to let that flow. And I had lots of personal things going on, you know, starting this company. I got divorced last year, so there's a lot going on, and you have to, you know, go with that creative flow. But editing is different than writing, right? Editing
Yep.
is a very different creative part of the brain than, and rewrites too. Rewrites are different than the original creation. So it was a big learning. This is my first fiction, so it was a big learning curve for me. And I would say that it was not unenjoyable. I really loved the process of it.
Cool. Yeah, and I love it too. And it is interesting how each phase challenges you in a slightly different way. Sometimes it's like in every book's a little bit different too. Like the
Yeah.
first book, you know, you love the writing process. And so doing the
Mm-hmm.
edits sometimes are like, oh, do I have to? But then as you
Mm-hmm.
go forward and you do more, it's like it almost gets to be this nice balance between both. Like you really love the writing part of it, but it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
fun to then go in and clean it up and make it even better. So
Right.
it's really interesting how it does change, or how each phase of it has its own like vibe or something. There's
Yeah.
just an experience that's really cool.
Yeah. I'd say the first draft, you know, the first draft of the first novel for me was like that very first love, that
Yeah.
very first teenage love. And you were devastated if it changes, right? And then now into the second and then third one, I've gotten a little more mature, right? The love, the relationship with the book it's different, right? As you grow and
Yeah.
as you mature, the love changes in a
Yeah, for
relationship.
sure.
So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and for some of us, I think the first book too is that, well, you said you just got a divorce as well. And so it's like I know that was the case for me. Like there was something about my first book where it was like I just needed to write this thing, and you think it's like your baby. You don't want anything to change.
Mm-hmm.
You think it's perfect as it is, all the things. But then when you look back, it's like that was the catalyst for the change in me. It wasn't about the story. It wasn't, I mean, even though the story's great and it's going to inspire people, I'm talking about my book and my experience,
Mm-hmm.
but then when you look back at it, it's like it was really just there as the catalyst for me. It was
Mm-hmm.
my trajectory shift and seeing what I could actually be capable of. It's really neat. What
Absolutely.
advice do you have for aspiring authors who wish to write their stories that empower and heal others for themselves and their readers, but they're not quite sure like where to get started or how to go about it? Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any advice there?
Yeah, and I'm gonna be actually. I thought I had this thought yesterday. I was like, I should actually put something on my website. Like, how do you get started writing? If I'm a story coach, right? Like, how do you get
Yeah,
started telling your story? So that's coming.
excellent.
But I was having this conversation with my publicist yesterday, and I was saying that, you know, the thing about it is you have to be able to tell your story to yourself first. And that lesson came from preaching at the church that I work for. The first sermon you ever preach is the sermon to yourself, and then you rewrite it, you practice it, you rewrite it, you practice it, and then you preach it to the congregation, and the congregation individually receives it. And then there's this magic that happens where it becomes a message for the community as a whole. And
Right.
so the very first step in that process is you write something for yourself. You tell the story to yourself.
Mm.
And so if whether writing a book is for you, whether it's starting a podcast, whether it's starting a blog or a vlog or a social media account, whatever it is, because stories can be told in 1,000 different ways nowadays. You have to write it, and I literally mean write it out,
Yep.
because that's the soil where you'll build everything from. That's the foundation. And then you have to read it to yourself. And if you don't take those necessary first steps, none of the other pieces can fall into place. Oh yeah, and you have to finish it.
Yes.
So I was talking to a lady who was interested in my coaching services, and she's like, I think I just want, I want to write a book, but I also want to start a blog. And I'm like, write a blog post, right? Like that is the first step. You have to
Yeah.
write one blog post. And she was like, oh, I don't have to have the whole blog planned out. No, you have to have one blog post, period.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so start with one thing, finish it, and then read it to yourself, and you let it marinate, you let it sit, and then at some point you put it out in the world. It doesn't have to be perfect either. Nothing is perfect.
Yep. I
So,
love that. When I was
yeah.
first back before I ever started writing, my best friend and my alpha reader who reads everything, she would we've known each other
Oh
since
yeah,
eighth
get
grade.
yourself an alpharita.
Yeah, right. I've got my husband now too, so that's great. But she was talking about like I was stuck in a really like weird loop with graphic design. I'd gone to school for
Yeah.
graphic design. I was like I felt called to do it, but now I don't like the culture here. It's like what do I want to do with this thing? And she's like, "Well, you've always liked to write. Why don't you like write a book?" And I'm like, "I can't write a book. I can't, I read books. I don't write books." And
Mm-hmm.
besides, I don't want to be like my aunt. Like, no. And I have an aunt who's always tried to write, and so it just never worked out for her. And she was like, "Well, then just start a blog, do a blog and see what
Mm-hmm.
happens." And so I followed that advice as well and started a blog, and I think I literally got two blog posts maybe written, and this
Mm-hmm.
the big story idea came, and then all of a sudden I
Yep.
was writing novels.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Just there's something about starting that unlocks the door for that
Yeah.
creativity, and then you'll know what your passion is. You'll know because I've done and I love podcasts. I had a podcast at a church. That was a different kind of writing. Done devotionals, different kind of writing. Loved it all, and now I'm in my novel phase, right? So
Yep.
I know the nonfiction will come back around. I have a blog for my nonfiction thoughts, and so you don't have to limit yourself and your creativity to one format. You can do multiple things. Social media content, that's a form of creative writing. And
Yep.
so don't limit yourself, but do start and see where it takes you.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Well, Amy, where can my audience find out more about you, about Teleosis, and all that you offer?
Yeah, so the easiest, most central place to do that is my website, and that's amywvogel.com. So amywvogel.com. And it's got links to all my social media. I'm probably biggest on Facebook and Instagram at this point. I just committed myself to launching a TikTok account for my books starting in May. My oldest is going to help me with that. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But
I feel you there.
yeah. um, it's got connections to everything. My books are on there, my coaching, everything's there. So just amywvogel.com.
Perfect. Well, Amy, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights, your wonderful story, everything that you are doing for authors and helping to elevate the community. It's wonderful. So thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. I loved this.
Wasn't that interview so fascinating? I was just so enamored listening to Amy talk about her process, her books, how she came about her storyline. It really just reminded me so much of myself when I was first coming into this world of indie authorship and writing. And I had no idea how much it was going to change my life. But it was that first step, that first decision to give it a try and to see what happened that changed everything. And it wasn't just like, oh, I can write this book. It was literally, it reshaped my world. My marriage like finally fell apart. It was something that should have, happened a lot sooner. But throughout that process, it was like I uncovered aspects of myself I didn't realize I had covered up. And then on top of it, it put me on this path of no longer, being just a graphic designer or being just a marketing professional or having been in the publishing industry and having nowhere else really to go. It was like it gave me a mission and a purpose again. And obviously, that has evolved over the years and changed so dramatically and drastically that here I am, gosh, like 14 years later, and I'm still doing it. I'm still writing books. I'm teaching authors how to write books. I'm teaching authors how to manifest more out of their lives. Like everything in my life is transformed and changed because of that one decision to have number one, the conversation with Sherry and to have her tell me to start writing. And number two, having actually taken that step to start the blog and then allow the story of Pendamis to come in and trust that I had enough to say or had enough creativity to make it happen. And so when you have that power of trusting your creativity, trusting that you were given this idea for a reason, and then you go with it and you run with it and you take that inspired action, that is where magic happens. That's where things start to shift and in ways that we'd never experienced before, or in ways that we never even knew we had to experience, right? Cool new things come up, and we are healed on deeper levels or on levels that we didn't even know we needed healing from. And I think that's really just a powerful message. And in addition to that, having the message of transformation, of transcendence, of asking women who are, the younger generations of women, like my daughter right now, she's 15, passing that torch on to her and talking to her about, like, life doesn't have to be the same way for you as it was for me. It doesn't, like, this world doesn't have to look like this. So it's up to you to start changing it, to mold it into a way that is going to really elevate not only your own life, but the lives of others around you. It's our purpose in life, truly, like, bigger and deeper and wider than just writing books or just telling stories. Our purpose is to view the world and to reshape it in ways that we haven't imagined just yet. And I think that's a really powerful tool. It's powerful and it's important. And what Amy is doing with teleosis and her series and what she teaches, I think that is incredibly, incredibly valuable. And I'm sure you do too. So if you would like to download the transcript to this powerful episode, head over to authorrevolution.org/233. You can grab it there. In addition, I will make sure that there are links over to Amy's website, and all the good things will be right there for you. Just let me know what you think of this podcast interview. I personally had such a wonderful time talking with Amy and just, like, talking about and thinking about the dynamics of how we get to live a different reality when we really want to, right? How we get to shape everything when we put our minds to it. So I'm going to leave you with that thought. Have a wonderful rest of the week and go forth and start your author revolution. Okay, indie author, Carissa Andrews with Author Revolution here. We need to have a chat. I know you want to build a sustainable long-term author career, but you can't do it just by wishing for it. It would be nice, yes, but alas, you gotta do the work. By that I mean you need to reframe the way you look at your author business so that you can write and publish more frequently. With Rapid Release Roadmap, my signature online course, I'll help you learn not only how to make writing and publishing 4 books a year seem easy, but I'll help you master your prolific author mindset so that you can clear away all the negative self-talk that's holding you back. Trust me, I have been there. To learn more about Rapid Release Roadmap, head over to rapidreleaseroadmap.com. Over there, I'll give you all the insights on what you'll find inside the course. Plus, I walk you through all of the bonuses you're going to get based on the payment option you choose. And yes, there are some good ones in there, even if I say so myself. Once again, head over to rapidreleaseroadmap.com to learn more and sign up today.